Greetings, I'm Mariswind of Cawdor, and I'd like to show you some easy blacksmithing projects you can take to Pennsic. Let's say you've had a beginner class in blacksmithing, or gotten a few lessons from a friend, and now you can make a hook. And if you can make a hook, you can make any of these other projects. An S-hook, an over the tent pole hook, a pole grabber hook, a lantern hanger, a poker, a cooking tripod, the links of a chain for a candle holder, a chandelier, a lantern, and a penannular brooch. A hook is a typical first project, the macaroni art of blacksmithing. But a hook isn't just a beginner project. It's more like a needlepoint sampler, a practice project that teaches many different skills. Pointing, drawing out, rounding, scrolling, bending, twisting, cutting, spreading, marking, drilling, and finishing. For a traditional finish, combine equal parts of beeswax, boiled linseed oil, and turpentine. Put them in a jar and leave it on a windowsill for 2 or 3 days. Do not heat it on the stove, ever. On the other hand, if you don't have 3 days, Johnson's paste wax gives exactly the same result. Being able to make a hook shows that you've mastered a dozen different skills. Put another way, if you can make a hook, you can do all these other projects. An over the tent pole hook, from which to hang shelves or tapestries, or even a fire extinguisher. The pole grabber hook, also called a gravity hook, can hold a lantern or candelabra, and a pair of them on the perimeter poles can hold a clothes bar. A very large J-hook can be used to hang a lantern. You can make even more projects with an S-hook. Make it extra long and hang a chandelier from it or a cooking pot. Form it to be a decorative chain for an incense burner. And I would include a penannular brooch as a variation on an S-hook. The two ends are pigtailed, the middle is twisted, and while it has one bend instead of two, it takes all the same skills to make. If you can make a hook, you can make a cooking tripod. Make 3 long bars, each with a curl on top and a pointed foot. If you're being really fancy, you can make the ring be a snake biting its tail. Using your hook-making skills, you can also make a fireplace poker. Point the end, or bend it over double to grab logs. Or suppose you need stanchions to cordon off the lists. Make a point on one end of the bar and scroll the other. All of the projects shown here are well within the reach of beginners. Now suppose you want to make a chandelier. It's not a difficult project. To do that, you need to be able to do 2 things. Ring roll a hoop and rivet the ends together. And no, that's not what I meant by ring rolling. Ring rollers were invented to make hoops for barrels. 3 wheels powered by a hand crank. Bend a strip of metal into a perfect circle. Your local hardware store probably doesn't carry them, but they're available at specialty stores like Harbor Freight. But before I roll the hoop, I drill the holes for the rivets and chains because it's easier to drill a strip of metal when it's flat. The instructions say the ring roller can handle a band up to 1 inch wide. But I rolled a 2-inch band by rolling one side, turning it around, and rolling the other side. It worked fine. After rolling the strip of metal, you'll want to rivet the ends closed. Drill the holes, insert the rivet, and flatten the end with a ball-peen hammer. Like ring rolling, riveting is done cold. You'll need something behind the rivet when you hammer it. I'm using the horn of the anvil. Early on, I made my own rivets from political sign wire, but I quickly discovered that it was easier to buy them. I got these from an SCA armorer on eBay. This hoop has been ring rolled and riveted closed. All of the work was done cold. If I had used heat, I would have used it to round the corners and thin the ends where they overlap. Once the hoop is finished, you can make the candle cups. Find a section of pipe that fits your candles. Cut off short sections and rivet them to the inside of the hoop. That can be a problem if the candle cups are smaller than the anvil horn. You'll want to use a stake anvil. Its small horn will fit inside the candle cup and back the rivet while you hammer it flat. The sections of pipe are open at the bottom. To keep the candles from falling through, I stop the ends with Fimo, a modeling clay that hardens when you bake it in the oven. Tea candles and votives look handsome in chandeliers, but they're 1.5 inches thick, twice the diameter of tapers. They don't fit into the sections of pipe I'd cut. I had to make actual candle cups, and that required forging. First, I heat a strip of metal and form it into a circle on a bending jig. Then I make a leaf and turn it under to support the candle. Finally, I drill a hole through the band for the rivet. Actually, I've shown this to you backwards. The real order is drill, leaf, bending jig. Here's the hoop with the candle cups. They're 1.5 inches in diameter and will hold either tea candles or votives. This last example looks complicated, but it's a particularly simple design. What's especially nice about it is that all the work can be done cold. Strips of metal are bent over at the top and then riveted to a hoop. The candle sits on top of the bent over part, on a spike or candle cup, or in the case of a fake candle, on a glue dot. If you make a double chandelier with an inner and outer hoop, it will look particularly impressive. Of all the beginner projects you might attempt, chandeliers are among the easiest. Once you've made the candle cups and riveted them in place, all that's left to do is attach the chains. There is no best number of candles for a chandelier, but there is a best number of chains, and that's 3, the most stable configuration. When there are 4 chains, one of them always sags. If you're feeling especially ambitious, you could decorate the band of your chandelier with quadrifoils. All you need is a drill press and some drill bits for metal. It's easiest to drill the quadrifoils before ring rolling the band. First, choose your drill bit size. The quadrifoil pattern occupies roughly half the band. To get the drill bit diameter, take the band width and divide by 4.5. Go with whatever drill bit is closest, usually a 1/4 or 3/8. Once you know the drill bit size, you need to decide where to drill the holes. First, make a paper template. Draw a circle the size of your drill bit. Then, draw a square around the circle. Mark each corner of the square. This is where you're going to drill. I like to make the marks a little outside the square, so the circles won't touch when I drill them. If one circle breaks into another, the drill bit binds and yanks the metal out of my hands. I strongly recommend practicing the pattern on wood before you attempt it on metal. Wood is easier to drill. The template will tell you where to punch starter holes for the drill. Without starter holes, the drill bit skates all over the surface of the metal, and where it ends up will probably be somewhere different than where you had in mind. Once all the holes have been drilled, I file through the thin bridges of metal between them. When the thin piece of metal in the center comes loose, I have a finished quadrifoil. I really recommend using a drill press. I have made quadrifoils with a hand drill, but it was very hard work, and they came out looking chewed. One final note. Quadrifoils take a long time to make. For a 4-candle chandelier, I put them between every candle. For a 6 or 8-candle chandelier, I put them between every other candle. It looks just as nice. Once you can make a chandelier, you can make other projects based on a hoop. This is an herb drying rack. It's a hoop with hooks riveted to the band. If you have a camp kitchen, it's a handsome way to display your herbs. And if you happen to acquire an exceptionally nice set of jewels, and you want to set them in the band of an iron crown, you could make the crown from an iron hoop, just like the one used for the chandelier. The jewels should be safe there. And once you can make a hoop, you can make a number of other easy projects. For example, this torch holder consists of 2 hoops riveted to 4 strips of metal. Any of these would make a suitable beginner project. And because they require only ring rolling and riveting, the entire project can be worked cold. This is my first attempt at a torch holder. It came out completely wonky. All I can say is, it looks like it was designed by a committee and then hit by a car, which is completely normal for the first time you do a project. Fire cages come in all sizes, and if you can make a torch holder, you can make a brazier. 2 hoops and 4 slats can also be used to make lanterns. Make the sides from 2 long strips which cross beneath the candle. This simple design has a very strong effect. As we've just seen, some very impressive projects can be worked cold, without using any heat at all. But, to no one's surprise, most blacksmithing projects require heat. Unfortunately, as a new smith, you probably don't have a forge of your own. So how are you going to get any forging time? If you took an Intro to Blacksmithing class, you automatically had 6 or 8 sessions in which to work. But what happens when the class is over? If you're lucky, you might be invited to work at the forge of a friend. Your guild may have open forge as part of their meetings. Your local maker's space may include blacksmithing as one of the crafts they sponsor. And you can get a whole day's worth of forging time by volunteering as a demonstrator at a historical reenactment event. You might think you have to be a master smith to do demonstrations in public, but don't let lack of experience stop you. I once saw a demo in which the blacksmith said, "This is my apprentice, and today is his first day at the anvil." So if you're a beginner and you want to be in a demo, you can always volunteer to be an apprentice. But even with all these resources, your forging time may add up to only a few hours a month. But what if you have a project you want to finish? For example, this is going to be a trivet. It's almost done. It only needs another quarter turn to close the circle. That shouldn't take long. However, I don't have any forging time until next month, so I'm just going to have to wait. I really wish there were some way I could forge at home. The next time you go to a craft fair, the blacksmiths are working on lightweight, portable equipment, usually known as a demo rig. Yet they have everything they need: an anvil, a source of heat, a quench bucket, and a vise. At some point, you might start to want a demo rig of your own. But not to take to craft fairs, to set up in your own driveway or backyard. And why not? Backyard blacksmithing is a fast-growing hobby. First, you're going to need an anvil. If you think you'll be carrying it in and out of the garage, you might want to get a small one. Most people look for antique anvils, but they can be hard to come by and expensive. As the craft of blacksmithing became more popular, the number of smiths increased, while the number of anvils remained the same. At the same time, antique collectors who weren't smiths took a great many anvils off the market. And then disaster struck. I'm talking about forged in fire. The popularity of the craft skyrocketed, and every new bladesmith wanted their own anvil. And anvils became even harder to find. Just for the record, I love this show. 2 people in my guild have been on it. But the law of supply and demand worked its magic, and the foundries began to cast new anvils. Modern anvils vary in quality, but these two are quite good. This is the 55-pound Pro grade, and this is the 66-pound Axieo. Most people take the paint off and dress the edges, which in a new anvil are going to be sharp. The second thing you need is a source of heat. Most blacksmiths use coal, and many of them bring small coal forges to demos. But coal is getting harder and harder to find, and blacksmiths are becoming increasingly resourceful in search of it. I prefer to forge with propane. I especially like the little forges that farriers bring to the job site when they shoe horses. Propane forges ignite with the push of a button and hold a constant temperature. They're so easy to use. They're like the microwave oven of blacksmithing. You can get them from a farrier's supply catalog called, wait for it, Centaur. But it took me a while to get up the nerve to try propane, as I'm known to be timid around dangerous equipment. I worried that if I did the tiniest thing wrong, there'd be a large occurrence and I'd wake up dead. Not just dead, but dead with no eyebrows. I needn't have worried. Lighting a propane forge is no more dangerous than lighting a gas grill. A grill and a forge even use the same tank, which is convenient because if I run out of gas while I'm forging, I can always swipe the tank from the grill. Although this little farrier's forge was built for making horseshoes, it can be used to make anything that will fit inside, like this lantern hanger. It may be a tiny forge, but the ports in each side allow long objects to be heated, like plant hangers, fireplace pokers, and swords. A post vise is another piece of equipment a blacksmith might take to a demo, even though it weighs as much as a small anvil. A post vise is used for twisting and bending, some of the most common things that blacksmiths do. If you do decide to get a post vise of your own, you have a choice between antique and modern. Modern has certain advantages. It will have all its parts, and the jaws will meet cleanly. Even so, I would recommend getting an antique. Reason? Price. Unlike anvils, where a small modern one is the best choice for someone just starting out. With a post vise, antique is the way to go. Apparently collectors haven't gotten interested in them, so new costs more than used. It takes a little extra knowledge to buy a good used post vise. Here's what to look for. Above all, it must have a spring. This is what the spring looks like. If the spring is missing, as it is on this one, it will never work properly. And there should be a plate to attach the vise to a support post. The jaws should close. They might close unevenly, but that's normal for antiques and nothing to worry about. Finally, the screw shouldn't show signs of wear. The threads don't always show, but often, for an online auction, the seller will take it apart to photograph wear patterns. If it has all its parts, and nothing is damaged or bent, then you've found yourself a good post vise. This is the demo rig I assembled to use in my driveway. It consists of a farrier's forge, an anvil, and a vintage post vise. For a quench bucket, I used a plastic pail from the hardware store. The whole thing ran about $800, plus another $200 for tools, and another $25 for safety gear. That sounds like a lot, but it's about a tenth of the cost of a traditional forge. Let's look at the individual components. This is a one-burner farrier's forge with a propane tank from a gas grill. This is a 30-pound anvil, cast at a foundry in Ohio. The anvil stand is made of scrap lumber. If you have only one hammer and one pair of tongs, a 2 or 3 pound cross-peen hammer and a pair of wolf jaw tongs are always a good choice. If you're forging with propane, you'll want tongs with longer reins than you'd use for coal. 17 inches is a good length. And if you get only one hardy tool, make it a hot cut hardy, because cutting metal with a hacksaw stops being fun after, about 1 minute. Vices are used for bending and twisting. The tools most often used with a vise are a twisting wrench, shown here with blue handles, and bending dogs. Once you have this rig assembled, you have everything you need to start forging at home. I'd like to close on one final note. Every one of the portable rigs I've shown you was set up outdoors. Don't try to forge indoors, ever, because carbon monoxide is not your friend. There's an easy button in blacksmithing, and it's called Power Tools. The first one I discovered was a bandsaw. Up until then, I had been hacksawing for 15 minutes at a time, and all I did to the metal was make it shiny. Now I could cut a dragon's mouth, or cut a slit that would become a ram's horn scroll. With a bandsaw, what had been a tedious chore became something easy and fun. The next discovery was a drill press. I didn't appreciate precision drilling until I began making quadrifoils. For certain applications, there's a big difference between drilling a hole where you want it versus almost where you want it. Another thing it took me a while to learn. You have to mark the hole with a center punch, or the drill bit will choose its own place to drill, and it won't be what you had in mind. The third must-have power tool is a belt sander. You can't tell from the picture, but this one is tiny. It was designed for blade makers and hobbits. These are mundane power tools, but you're not taking them to Pennsic. You'll use them at home to make things to take to Pennsic. People ask me how I got into blacksmithing. Was it because I enjoyed watching blacksmith demos at historical sites? Or was it because of Forged in Fire? No and no, although both of those are good guesses. I got into blacksmithing while writing a fan fiction piece called The Forging of the Ring. In it, I tried to describe, in as much detail as possible, exactly what Sauron did to forge the ring. Unfortunately, I knew little to nothing about blacksmithing. That made it hard to write a convincing story. Luckily, a friend at work was an amateur blacksmith, and he introduced me to the local guild, which had classes for beginners. And I was hooked. Anything you've seen in this class, you can find online, even a 100-pound anvil. Let's just say my UPS man hates me. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to contact me at yuvalthathehorseman@gmail.com.